Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Western Canon Challenge, where we are reading the entirety of the Western Literary Canon out loud. Today we are continuing journal collection number 32 by Ralph Waldo Emerson from the year 1841, and we are on topic called poetry. I'm starting with that because there are many pages till he actually writes an actual date in his journals, so I had to split the video beforehand into separate parts, even though it didn't end on a date. So I'm picking up midway through a journal entry. It's probably multiple journal entries, but he didn't bother putting a date because he's being a little bit lax with it, I guess, or at least not treating his journals in the manner that he had before, where he was very consistent in writing down the days. So it might be that he's sort of dipping into it to jot down ideas, and so it's expanding maybe more than a little bit than just a journal. We see that also with he'll title something character or circles or stuff like things like that actually become essays later. And in the footnotes, it says this is a version of what would later become an essay in the second series. So that's starting to increase, I think. And if I had to guess, I would say that will only increase from here. So, with that said, I will start, and the topic at the moment he is writing on is poetry. But now with poetry, I would say that when I go out into the fields in a still sultry day, in a still sultry humor, I do not perceive that the finest rhythms and cadences of poetry are yet unfound, and that in that purer state which glimmers before us, rhythms of a fairy and dreamlike music shall enchant us, compared with which the finest measures of English poetry are psalm tunes. I think now that the very finest and sweetest closes and falls are not in our meters, but in the measures of eloquence, which have greater variety and richness than verse. Now, alas, we know something too much about our poetry. We are not part and parcel of it. It does not descend like a foreign conqueror from an unexpected quarter of the horizon upon us, carry us away with our flocks and herds into a strange and appalling captivity, to make us, at a later period, adopted children of the great king, and in the end to disclose to us that he was our real parent, and this realm and palace is really our native country. Yet I please myself with thinking that there may yet be somewhere such elation of heart, such continuity of thought, that a man shall see the little sun and moon whisk about, making day and night, making month and month, without heed, in the grandeur of his absorption. Now we know not only when it is day and when night, but we hear the dinner bell ring with the most laudable punctuality. I am not such a fool but that I taste the joy which comes from a new and prodigious person, from Dante, from Rabelais, from Piranesi, flinging wide to me the doors of new modes of existence, and even if I should intimate by premature nod my too economical perception of the old thrum, that the basis of this joy is at least the instinct that I am only let into my own estate, that the poet and his book and his story are only fictions and semblances in which my thought is pleased to dress itself, I do not the less yield myself to the keen delight of difference and newness. I think that the importance of fine scenery is usually greatly exaggerated, for the astonishing part of every landscape is the meeting of the sky and the earth. A man in black came in while I spoke, and my countenance fell. Then I said, surely I see that the Swedenborgian finds a sweetness in his church, and is enveloped by it in a love and society that haunts him by night and by day. But if the Unitarian is invited to go out and preach to Unitarians at Peoria, Illinois, I see no question so fit or inevitable as that he should ask whether they will pay the expense of his journey and maintain him well. In good society, say among the angels in heaven, is not everything spoken by indirection, and nothing quite straight as it befell? It seems as if the day was not wholly profane, in which I have seen with interest a natural object. At least these things are not drenched in our personalities and village ambition, pay no tax, own no Citibank stock, and need not engage their wood to be sawed. And yet, whilst they rescue me from my village, I know that they attract me for somewhat which they symbolize, that they are not foreign as they seem, but related. Wait a little, and I shall see the return even of this remote and hyperbolic curve. Margaret Fuller talked of ballads and our love for them. Strange that we should so value the wild man, the Ishmaelite, and his slogan, claymore and tomahawk rhymes, and yet every step we take, everything we do, is to tame them. It is like Farley's pioneer hatred of civilization, and absconding from it to cut down trees all winter and comfort himself that he was preparing for civilization. Margaret does not think, she says, in the woods, only finds herself expressed. One of my stories promised above to embody the history of the times. A life and times should be that of the little Edward Webster, who asked his father one day, after grace had been said at dinner, who would say whiz whiz at dinner when he should be gone to Washington. Another of like import in the chapter of religion would be Lieutenant Bliss's reply to me when I asked him if they had morning prayers at West Point as at a college. He said, "We have reveille beat, which is the same thing." Of the best jokes of these days is that told of poor Bokum, that when he went to hire a horse and chaise at a stable in Cambridge, and the man inquired whether he should put it in a buffalo. "My God, no!" cried the astonished German. "Put in a horse." I value Shakespeare, yes, as a metaphysician, and admire the unspoken logic which upholds the structure of Iago, Macbeth, Antony, and the rest. I value Shakespeare, yes, as a metaphysician, and admire the unspoken logic which upholds the structure of Iago, Macbeth, Antony, and the rest. Is it the real poverty at the bottom of all this seeming affluence, the headlong speed with which in London, Paris, and Cochin China each seeing soul comes straight through all the thin masquerade on the old fact? Is it the disgust at this indigence of nature which makes these raging livers like Napoleon, Timur, Byron, Trelawney, and John Quincy Adams drive their steeds so hard, in the fury of living to forget the soup maigre of life? It is a bad fact that our editors fancy they have a right to call on Daniel Webster to resign his office, or, much more, resign his opinion and accept theirs. That is the madness of party. I account it a good sign, indicative of public virtue in the Whigs, that there are so many opinions among them, and that they are not organized and drilled. There are two directions in which souls may move. One is trust, religion, consent to be nothing for eternity, entranced waiting, the worship of ideas. The other is activity, the busybody, the following of that practical talent which we have, in the belief that what is so natural, easy, and pleasant to us, and desirable to others, will surely lead us out safely. In this direction lies usefulness, comfort, society, low power of all sorts. The other is solitary, grand, secular. I see not but these diverge from every moment, and that either may be chosen. When I was in college, John L. Gardiner said one day that, quote, he had serious thoughts of becoming religious next week, but perhaps he should join the Porcelains. It is no joke, I have often thought the same thing. Whether does love reconcile these two divergencies? For it is certain that every impulse of that sentiment exalts, and yet it brings all practical power into play. Here I am in a dark corner again. We have no one example of the poetic life realized, therefore all we say seems bloated. If life is sad and do not content us, if the heavens are brass and rain no sweet thoughts on us, and especially we have nothing to say to a shipwrecked and self-tormenting and young old people, let us hold our tongues. And if to my soul the day does not seem dark, nor the cause lost, why should I use such ruinous courtesy as to concede that God has failed, because the plain colors or the storm suit of gray clouds in which the day is dressed do not please the rash fancy of my companions? Patience and truth, Patience with our own frosts and negations, and few words must serve. If our sleeps are long, if our flights are short, if we are not plumed and painted like orioles and birds of paradise, but like sparrows and plebeian birds, if our taste and training are earthen, let that fact be humbly and happily borne with. The wise God beholds that also with complacency. Wine and honey are good, but so are rice and meal. Perhaps all that is not performance is preparation, or performance that shall be. October 8th. Exclusives. The closed communion Baptists have a crowded communion. The open communion Unitarians have an empty table. If you wish to fill your house, make the door so narrow that a fat man cannot get in, and you shall be sure to be crammed with company. The quote-unquote champion of England is never called on until what new boxer has appeared has beaten all others who have met him in the ring. Then the existing champion must appear, or forfeit his dignity and his pension. So the wise man need never trouble himself about the writings of the philosophers of the day until they have hit the white, and come within his bolt. Quote, O golden lads and lasses must, like chimney sweepers, come to dust. Riches. Few may be trusted to speak of wealth. Quicksilver is our gauge of temperature of air and water. Clay is our pyrometer. Silver our photometer. Feathers our electrometer. Catgut our hydrometer. But what is our meter of man, our anthropometer? Poverty is the mercury. Wealth seems the state of man. The view taken of transcendentalism in State Street is that it threatens to invalidate contracts. Plutarch's heroes are my friends and relatives. As we drive it, the artist is in some degree sacrificed. Michelangelo, to paint Sistine frescoes, must lose for a time the power to read without holding the book over his head, and Dr. Herschel, to keep his eyes for nocturnal observation, must shield them from daylight. Thomas H. Benton's speeches and the protocols of Vienna and St. Petersburg are as much in the circuit of today's universe, have got to be accounted for as are most the vital and beautiful appearance, and the theory of heaven and earth can be equally established on the lowest and the highest fact. The permissive as much characterizes God as the beloved. As I looked at the Madonnas and Magdalens in the Athenaeum, I saw that for the most part the painter seemed to draw from models, and from such beauties therefore as models are likely to be, flesh and color and emotion, but from lordly intellectual spiritual beauties, quote, the great seraphic lords and cherubim, of the sex, no sign but in Raphael's. Yet 2 or 3 Greek women, clear, serene, and organically noble as any forms which remain to us on vase or temple, adorn my group and picture of life, and we demand that character shall have nothing muddy or turbid, but shall be transparent, sublime as God pleases, but not eccentric. Elizabeth Hoare consecrates. I have no friend whom I more wish to be immortal than she, an influence I cannot spare, but must always have at hand for recourse. When Margaret mentioned an expression of unbroken purity, I said, that is hers. M. replied, yes, but she knows. I answer, know or know not, the impression she makes is that her part is taken. She has joined herself irrevocably to the sanctities, to the muses and the gods. Others suggest often that they still balance. Their genius draws them to happiness. They contemplate, experiment. They have not abdicated the power of election. Opium and honey, the dagger and madness they should like, should still lie there in the background as shadows and possibilities. But Elizabeth's mind is made up, and she has soared into another firmament, and these exist not for her. Bonaparte did not like ideologists. Elizabeth is no poet, but her holiness is substantive and must be felt, like the heat of a stove or the gravity of a stone, and Bonaparte would respect her. Life. Is identity tedious? Not if we can see to the life. that always stupefies us with sweet astonishment. A million times since the sun rose have the words, "I thank you," been spoken. Yet are they just as graceful and musical in my ear when spoken with living emotion as if now first coined. Riches. People say law, but they mean wealth. Genius. The observations of talent are punctures, but of genius shafts which unite at the bottom of the mine. But ah, this scud of opinions. Hope. We sit chatting here in the dark, but do we not know that all the sun will yet again shine, and we shall depart each to our work? God will resolve all doubts, fill all measures. I would have my book read as I have read my favorite books, not with explosion and astonishment, a marvel and a rocket, but a friendly and agreeable influence stealing like the scent of a flower, or the sight of a new landscape on a traveler. I neither wish to be hated and defied by such as I startle, nor to be kissed and hugged by the young whose thoughts I stimulate. Partridge berry, white alder, or Prinos. The sum of life ought to be valuable when the fractions and particles are so sweet. The daguerreotype is good for its authenticity. No man quarrels with his shadow, nor will he with his miniature when the sun was the painter. Here is no interference, and the distortions are not the blunders of an artist, but only those of motion, imperfect light, and the like. October 12th. I would that I could, I know afar off that I cannot, give the lights and shades, the hopes and outlooks that come to me in these strange, cold, warm, attractive, repelling conversations with Margaret, whom I always admire, most revere when I nearest see, and sometimes love, yet whom I freeze, and who freezes me to silence, when we seem to promise to come nearest. October 14th. It is not the proposition, but the tone that signifies. Is it a man that speaks, or the mimic of a man? Universal Whiggery is tame and weak. Every proclamation, dinner speech, report of victory, or protest against the government it publishes betrays its thin and watery blood. It is never serene, nor angry, nor formidable, neither cool nor red hot. Instead of having its own aims passionately in view, it cants about the policy of a Washington and a Jefferson. It speaks to expectation, and not the torrent of its wishes and needs, waits for its antagonist to speak that it may have something to oppose, and, failing that, have nothing to say, is happy to hurrah. What business have Washington or Jefferson in this age? They lived in the greenness and timidity of the political experiment. The kitten's eyes were not yet opened. They shocked their contemporaries with their daring wisdom. Have you not something which would have shocked them? If not, be silent, for others have. Passion, appetite seem to have a self-reliance in reality, but Whiggery is a great fear. I saw in Boston Fanny Elser in the ballet of Nathalie. She must show, I suppose, the whole compass of her instrument, and add to her softest graces of motion, or the wisdom of her feet, the feats of the rope dancer and tumbler. And perhaps, on the whole, the beauty of the exhibition is enhanced by this that is strong and strange, as when she stands erect on the extremities of her toes, or on one toe, or, performs the impossible, in attitude. But the chief beauty is in the extreme grace of her movement, the variety and nature of her attitude, the winning fun and spirit of all her little coquetries, the beautiful erectness of her body, and the freedom and determination which she can so easily assume, and, what struck me much, the air of perfect sympathy with the house, and with the mixture of deference and conscious superiority which puts her in perfect spirits and equality to her part. When she curtsies, her sweet and slow and prolonged salaam which descends and still descends whilst the curtain falls, until she seems to have invented new depths of grace and condescension, she earns well the profusion of bouquets of flowers which are hurled onto the stage. As to the morals, as it is called, of this exhibition, that lies wholly with the spectator. The basis of this exhibition, like that of every human talent, is moral, is the sport and triumph of health, or the virtue of organization. Her charm for the house is that she dances for them, or they dance in her, not being, fault of some defect in their forms and educations, able to dance themselves. We must be expressed. Hence all the cheer and exhilaration which the spectacle imparts, and the intimate property which each beholder feels in the dancer, and the joy with which he hears good anecdotes of her spirit and her benevolence. They know that such surpassing grace must rest on some occult foundations of inward harmony. But over and above her genius for dancing are the incidental vices of this individual, her own false taste, or her meretricious arts to please the groundlings, and which must displease the judicious. The immortality, the immoral will see, the very immoral will see that only. The poor will not heed it, for it is not obtrusive, perhaps will not see it at all. I should not think of the danger to young women stepping with their father or brother out of happy and guarded parlors into this theatre, to return in a few hours to the same. But I can easily suppose that it is not the safest resort for college boys who have left metaphysics, conic sections, or Tacitus to see these tripping satin slippers, and they may not forget this graceful, silvery swimmer when they have retreated again to their baccalaureate cells. It is a great satisfaction to see the best in each kind, and as a good student of the world, I desire to let pass nothing that is excellent in its own kind unseen, unheard. In town I also heard some admirable music. It seemed as I groped for the meaning, as if I were hearing a history of the adventures of fairy knights. Some Wace or Monstrelet or Friesart was telling in a language which I very imperfectly understood, the most minute and laughable particulars of the tournaments and loves and quarrels and religion and tears and fate of airy adventurers, small as moths, fine as light, swifter than shadows, and these anecdotes were illustrated with all sorts of mimicry and scene painting, all fun and humor and grief, and now and then the very persons described broke in and answered and danced and fought and sung for themselves. I saw Webster on the street, but he was changed since I saw him last, black as a thundercloud and careworn. The anxiety that withers this generation among the young and thinking class had crept up also into the great lawyer's chair, and too plainly he was one of us. I did not wonder that he depressed his eyes when he saw me, and would not meet my face. The cankerworms have crawled to the topmost bough of the wild elm and swing down from that. No wonder the elm is a little uneasy. Here follows a poem entitled Water. The water understands civilization well. It wets my foot but prettily. It chills my life but wittily. It is not disconcerted, it is not broken-hearted. Well used, it decketh joy, adorneth, doubleth joy. Ill used, it will destroy, in perfect time and measure, with a face of golden pleasure, elegantly destroy. On the great rarity of good expressions. Fanny Elser is a good expression. She can say in her language what her neighbors cannot say in theirs. Part of the reason why Elser is so bewitching to the gay people is that they are pinched and restrained by the decorums of city life, and she shows them freedom. They walk through their cotillions in Papanti's assemblies, but Fanny's arms, head, and body dance as well as her feet, and they are greatly refreshed to see. I rode to town with some insane people. The worst of such company is that they always bite you, and then you run mad also. The aim of aristocracy is to secure the ends of good sense and beauty without vulgarity or deformity of any kind, but they use a very operose method. What an apparatus of means to secure a little conversation! It would give me no pleasure to sit in your house, it would give me none to be caressed by you, so long as this infernal infantry, fine clothes, dinners, and servants, hinder me from that dear and spiritual conversation that I desire. There will come a time when these obstructions arising from I know not what cause will pass away. If it is a poorness of spirit in me, I shall be warned with the wine of God, and shall walk with a firmer step. If it is some unreasonable demand in you, experience will have reduced your terms to the level of practicability. The tone is all. In writing, the casting moment is of greatest importance, just as it avails not in dogger portraits that you have the very man before you, if his expression has escaped. October 21st. Yet is it not ridiculous, this that we do in this languid idle trick, that we have gradually fallen into of writing and writing without end? After a day of humiliation and stripes, if I can write it down, I am straightway relieved and can't sleep well. After a day of joy, the beating heart is calmed again by the diary. If grace is given me by all angels, and I pray, if then I can catch one ejaculation of humility or hope, and set it down in syllables, devotion is at an end. When the great man comes, he will have that social strength which Dr. Kirkland or Dr. Franklin or Robert Burns had, and will so engage us to the moment that we shall not suspect his greatness until late afterward in some dull hour we shall say, I am enlarged. How dull was I! Is not of late my horizon wider and new? This man, whence came he? One thing more, as the solar system moves forward in the heavens, certain stars open before us, and certain stars close up behind us. So is man's life. October 22nd. Would Jesus be received at Almack's? Would the manner of Adam and Eve be admired at Tuileries? In the lonely woods I remember London, and think I should like to be initiated in the exclusive circles. There are two ways: one, to conquer them and go as Attila to Rome, or as Napoleon married into the House of Austria. It has this condition, that it be of the greatest kind, such conquest as grand genius makes, and so the individual demonstrates his natural aristocracy, best of the best. It must hold its place subject to this condition of refreshing instantly old merits with new ones, or making its first stroke one of those strokes for empire which perpetuates position. Fashion is a large region, and reaches from the precincts of heaven to the purlieus of hell. Mr. Philip Sidney is the presiding deity. Inhumanity. You come into this company meanly. How so? We have come for the love of seeing each other and of conversing together. You have come to give us things which are written already in your notebooks, and when you have told them, you are spent. The best of our talk is invented here, and we go hence greater than we came by so much life as we have awakened in each other. But you, when your quiver is emptied, must sit dumb and careful the rest of the evening. Everything you say makes you poorer, and everything we say makes us richer. You go home when the company breaks up forlorn. We go home without a thought on ourselves, full of happiness to pleasant dreams. To be sure, there is a class of discreet citizens, like secret-keeping men, good providers for their households, whom you know where to find. But do not measure by their law this wild influence which I found, to be sure, in space and time, but knew at once it could not be there imprisoned. A nature that lay enormous, indefinite, hastening every moment out of all limitation, and to be treated like oxygen and hydrogen, of a diffusive, universal, irrevocable elasticity. He could keep no secret, he could keep no property, he could keep no law but his own. Margaret is, quote, a being of unsettled rank in the universe, so proud and presumptuous, yet so meek, so worldly and artificial, and with keenest sense and taste for all pleasures of luxurious society, yet living more than any other for long periods in a trance of religious sentiment. A person who, according to her own account of herself, expects everything for herself from the universe. October 23rd. Milton describes religion in his time as leaving the tradesman when he goes into his shop to meet him again when he comes out. In so pure a church as the Swedenborgian, I cannot help feeling the neglect which leaves holiness out of trade. These omissions damn the church. We forget in taking up a contemporary book that we see the house that is building and not the house that is built. A glance at my own manuscripts might teach me that all my poems are unfinished, heaps of sketches but no masterpiece, yet when I open a printed volume of poems, I look imperatively for art. I think society has the highest interest in seeing that this movement called the Transcendental is no boys' or girls' play, but has an interest very near and dear to him, that it has a necessary place in history, is a fact not to be overlooked, not possibly to be prevented, and, however discredited to the heedless and to the moderate and conservative persons by the foibles or inadequacy of those who partake the movement, yet is it the pledge and the herald of all that is dear to the human heart, grand and inspiring to human faith. I think the genius of this age more philosophical than any other has been, righter in its aims, truer, with less fear, less fable, less mixture of any sort. October 24th. Permanence is the nobility of human beings. We love that lover whose gayest love song, whose fieriest engagement of romantic devotion is made good by all the days of all the years of strenuous long suffering, ever renewing benefit. The old count said to the old countess of Ilchester, I know that wherever thou goest, thou wilt both trust and honor me, and thou knowest that wherever I am, I shall honor thee. We read either for antagonism or for confirmation. It matters not which way the book works on us, whether to contradict and enrage or to edify and inspire. Bub Doddington is of the first class which I read today. A good indignation brings out all one's powers. Everybody, old men, young women, boys, play the doctor with me and prescribe for me. They always did so. Life in Boston, a play in 2 acts, youth and age. Toys, dancing school, sets, parties, picture galleries, sleigh rides, Nahant, Saratoga Springs, lectures, concerts. Sets, through them all, solitude and poetry, friendship, ennui, desolation, decline, meanness, plausibility, old age, death. In the Republic must always happen what happened here, that the steamboats and stages and hotels vote one way, and the nation votes the other. And it seems to every meeting of readers and writers as if it were intolerable that the Broad Street paddies and bar-room politicians, the sots and loafers, and all manners of ragged and unclean and foul-mouthed persons, without a dollar in their pocket, should control the property of the country and make the lawgiver and the law. But is that any more than their share whilst you hold property selfishly? They are opposed to you. Yes, but first you are opposed to them. They, to be sure, malevolently, menacingly, with songs and rowdies and mobs. You cunningly, plausibly, and well bred. You cheat and they strike. You sleep and eat at their expense. They vote and threaten and sometimes throw stones at yours. Were you ever daguerreotyped, O immortal man? And did you look with all vigor at the lens of the camera, or rather, by the direction of the operator, at the brass peg a little below it, to give the picture the full benefit of your expanded and flashing eye? And in your zeal not to blur the image, did you not keep every finger in its place with such energy that your hands became clenched as for fight or despair, and in your resolution to keep your face still, did you feel every muscle becoming every moment more rigid, the brows contracted into a Tartarean frown, and the eyes fixed as they are fixed in a fit, in madness, or in death? And when at last you are relieved of your dismal duties, did you find that curtain drawn perfectly, and the coat perfectly, and the hands true, clenched for combat, and the shape of the face and head? But unhappily the total expression escaped from the face, and the portrait of a mask instead of a man. Could you not by grasping it very tight, hold the stream of a river or of a small brook, and prevent it from flowing? I told Garrison that I thought he must be a very young man, or his time hang very heavy on his hands, who can afford to think much and talk much about the foibles of his neighbors, or quote unquote denounce and play the son of thunder, as he called it. I am one who believes all times to be pretty much alike, and yet I sympathize so keenly with this. We want to be expressed, yet you take from us war, that great opportunity which allowed the accumulations of electricity to stream off from both poles, the positive and the negative. Well, now you take from us our cup of alcohol, as before you took our cup of wrath. We had become canting moths of peace, our helm was a skillet, and now we must become temperance water sops. You take away, but what do you give? Mr. Jeffs has been preached into tipping up his barrel of rum into the brook, but day after tomorrow, when he wakes up cold and poor, will he feel that he was somewhat for somewhat? No, this is mere thieving. If I could lift him by happy violence into a religious beatitude, or into a Socratic trance, and imparadise him in ideas, or into the pursuit of human beauty, a divine lover, then should I have greatly more than indemnified him for what I have taken. I should not take. He would put away, or rather ascend out of this litter and sty in which he had rolled, to go up clothed and in his right mind into the assembly and conversation of men. I fight in my fashion, but you, O Paddies and roarers, must not fight in yours. I drink my tea and coffee, but as for you and your cups, here is the pledge in the Temperance Society. I walk on Sundays and read Aristophanes and Rabelais in church hours, but for you, go to church. Good vent or bad we must have for our nature. Make love a crime, and we shall have lust. If you cannot contrive to raise up to the love of science and make brute matter our antagonist, which we shall have joy in handling, mastering, penetrating, condensing to adamant, dissolving to light, then we must brawl, carouse, gamble, or go to bullfights. If we can get no full demonstration of our heart and mind, we feel wronged and incarcerated. The philosophers and divines we shall hate most, as the upper turnkeys. We wish to take the gas which allows us to break through your wearisome properties, to plant the foot, to set the teeth, to fling abroad the arms, and dance and sing. Editor's note. Here follows many passages printed in The Transcendentalist and Lecture on Times. End of editor's note. Society ought to be forgiven if it do not love its rude unmaskers. The Council of Trent did not love Father Paul's Sarpy. But I show you, says the philosopher, the leprosy which is covered by these gay coats. Well, I had rather see the handsome mask than the unhandsome skin, replies Beacon Street. Do you not know that this is a masquerade? Did you suppose I took these harlequins for the kings and queens, the gods and goddesses they represent? I am not such a child. There is a terrific skepticism at the bottom of the determined conservers. The Rhine of our divinity school has strangely lost itself in the sands. A man enters the divinity school, but knows not what shall befall him there, or where he shall come out of its tortuous track. Some reappear in trade, some in the navy, some in Swedenborg chapels, some in landscape painting. Confide to the end in spiritual and not in carnal weapons. It needs not to fight the battle of anti-slavery on the questions of the seat in the cars. The doctrine advances every day among all people that a high chair and a platform, a strip of gold lace, a sword, a title, is not to protect an individual, but himself alone, his ability, his knowledge, his character. A clown, an idiot, may sit next to him. He is begirt with an army of guards and the faculties and influences of his spirit. How can they contaminate him? Presently a man will commonly put his pride in sitting in low seats, in mean dress, and mean company with mulattoes and blacks, and the legislator or the anti-slavery society will not need to interfere. "What are you doing, Zeke?" said Judge Webster to his eldest boy. "Nothing." "What are you doing, Daniel?" "Helping Zeke." A tolerably correct account of most of our activity today. It seems to me sometimes that we get our education ended a little too quick in this country. As soon as we have learned to read and write and cipher, we are dismissed from school, and we set up for ourselves. We are writers and leaders of opinion, and we write away without check of any kind, play whatsoever mad prank, indulge whatever spleen or oddity or obstinacy comes into our dear head, and even feed our complacency thereon, and thus fine wits come to nothing, as good horses spoil themselves by running away and straining themselves. I cannot help seeing that Dr. Channing would have been a much greater writer had he found a strict tribunal of writers, a graduated intellectual empire established in the land, and knew that bad logic would not pass, and that the most severe exaction was to be made on all who enter these lists. Now, if a man can write a paragraph for a newspaper, next year he writes what he calls a history, and reckons himself a classic incontinently, nor will his contemporaries in critical journal or review question his claims. It is very easy to teach the degree of culture that prevails around us, very hard to pass it, and Dr. Channing, had he found Wordsworth, Southey, Coleridge, and Lamb around him, would as easily have been severe with himself and risen a degree higher as he stood where he is. I mean, of course, a genuine intellectual tribunal, not a literary junto of Edinburgh wits, or dull conventions of quarterly or gentlemen's reviews. Somebody offers to teach me mathematics. I would fain learn. The man is right. I wish that the writers of this country would begin where they now end their culture. Are the writers then to be reproached with writing to the English public? No, but to be congratulated. It shows they oversee their own and propose to themselves the best existing standard. Our contemporaries. As Charles said, we have one set. It takes time to learn their names and allows for their humors so as to draw the most advantage from them. We all know the same stories, have read the same books, know the same politics, churches, geniuses, felons, bores, hoaxes, gossip, so that there is nothing to explain. But we can fall into conversation very quickly, and get and give such information by the road as we want without needing to collect lexicons and dragomans when we wish to ask the way to the next village. This is the end of part 5 of Emerson's journal collection number 32. In the next video, we will take up again with journal collection 32, starting with the date October 28th. Thank you for listening.